Long ago, in the endless stretches of space, there was a place so dark that even the stars dared not shine. This place was called the Dead Zone. No ship had ever returned from it, and no living creature had passed through without losing something important. The ancient ones, who traveled the stars before, told tales of this strange and eerie place, where time itself seemed to stop, and nothing lived. A crew of brave explorers, led by Captain Eris, sailed toward the Dead Zone, hoping to uncover its secrets. Their starship, the Wanderer, was built for deep space journeys, but even its engines shuddered as they approached the place. "We will solve the mystery of the Dead Zone," Captain Eris declared, his voice steady but his eyes full of doubt. As the Wanderer crossed into the Dead Zone, the stars above blinked out one by one. The usual hum of the engine stopped, and the crew felt the ship grow still, as if it were floating in an endless dream. "Nothing but darkness," said Lieutenant Kala, her voice barely a whisper. The crew tried to send out signals, but their messages disappeared into the void. Then, strange things began to happen. The air grew heavy, and the ship's lights flickered. And in the distance, something moved. The crew could feel it, an ancient force, watching them, waiting in the silence of the void. But what it was, no one knew. As the crew ventured deeper into the Dead Zone, the ship's systems began to fail one by one. The lights flickered in and out, and strange shadows danced across the walls, as though unseen beings moved just beyond their reach. The air turned cold, and a strange hum vibrated through the metal of the Wanderer, though no one could trace its source. It felt as if the ship itself were alive, and afraid. One night, as Captain Eris sat in the command chair, staring into the impenetrable blackness outside, he heard a voice. It was faint at first, like a whisper, but it grew louder, clearer. "Turn back," it said. "You should not be here." The voice seemed to echo from everywhere and nowhere, sending a chill down Eris's spine. He scrambled to the control panel, trying to restart the communication systems, but nothing worked. "Kala," he shouted. "Do you hear that?" Lieutenant Kala, her face pale, shook her head. "No, Captain. But something feels wrong. Something old." The crew gathered in the observation deck, staring into the emptiness. That's when they saw it. A massive, shadowy form moved slowly across the darkness. It wasn't a ship, but something much larger, like a forgotten beast from the farthest corners of the galaxy. Its shape was impossible to make out, but it seemed to pulse with a strange energy. Captain Eris's heart pounded in his chest. "What is it?" he whispered. "What are we facing?" The creature, if it was a creature, seemed to be drawn toward them, as if it had been waiting. The Dead Zone was its home, and the crew had unknowingly trespassed into its domain. The whispers grew louder, now full of dread, warning them to leave. But there was no turning back now. The ship began to shake violently. Whatever was out there had noticed them. And in that moment, they realized the Dead Zone held more than just a mystery, it held a power ancient and unstoppable. The shaking of the Wanderer grew worse, as if the ship itself were caught in the grip of an invisible force. Captain Eris gripped the control panel, struggling to keep the ship steady. "Hold on," he shouted, though the crew was already holding their breath, eyes wide with fear. The shadows outside the ship swirled and twisted, forming shapes that didn't belong in any universe the crew had ever known. And then, there was a sudden silence. No hum, no shaking, just the cold, empty stillness of the Dead Zone. That's when they heard it again, the voice. But this time, it was not a whisper. It was clear, full of sorrow and warning. "You are not the first," it said, echoing in their minds. "The ones before you, they came seeking the lost one. The one who vanished before the stars were born." The crew stood frozen, staring into the darkness as the voice continued. "We, the first travelers of the universe, sought to understand the power of the stars. But we found something else. Something ancient. Something that does not belong." Suddenly, the ship's systems flickered back to life, and the eerie form outside grew clearer. The massive shape revealed itself, an ancient, forgotten ship, its hull covered in strange markings, drifting silently in the void. It was not dead, but not fully alive either. It had been lost in the dead zone, caught by the very thing the crew had come to understand. A lost civilization, lost knowledge, and a warning from the stars themselves. Captain Eris realized then that the dead zone was not just a place, it was a prison. A place where ancient knowledge and forgotten truths were trapped, waiting for those foolish enough to enter. And as the strange ship began to move toward them, they knew that the crew was now part of a much larger story, one that would echo through the stars for eons to come. The voice, now softer, whispered one final warning: some truths are too great for the living to bear. Leave now, while you still can. But it was too late. The ship was already caught, its fate sealed in the darkness of the dead zone. The legends of the first travelers lived on in whispers, waiting to be uncovered by those brave enough to face the unknown. And so, the tale of the dead zone continued, a mystery that would never be fully solved, but forever whispered among the stars.